like it's such a dramatic increase in sort of the customer experience. And whatever leakage there is, I think is the technical term, is fine because they're making like $4.95 of profit on every single one of those models that I'm grabbing, right? And so a great use case. Same thing with the airports, right? Captive audience, you want to go in, grab something, walk out. That's good. And it's good for everyone. So by all accounts, yes. I regret the relatively short snippet in how it perhaps came across as overly negative when it sounds like this is pretty admirable. You figure out a new technology, you put it out there, you figure out where it works, where it doesn't work, then you double down on where it does work. In other words, in other areas, you keep experimenting. So kudos to Amazon. Go big tech.
And for anybody who's new to the story or wasn't following it last week, just to give people a sense of how it was framed, I'll read a tweet from a guy named Max Burns. He wrote, Amazon billed its just walk out stores as some triumph of AI. In reality, it was powered by thousands of low-paid Indian workers manually adding up items in your cart as you shopped. How insanely dystopian. And he was linking to this Gizmodo story.
Yeah, probably should have a red flag right there.
Right. They wrote Amazon is phasing out its checkout list grocery stores with just walk out technology. The technology allows customers to skip checkout altogether by scanning a QR code when they enter the store. Though it seemed completely automated, just walk out relied on more than 1,000 people in India watching and labeling videos to ensure accurate checkouts. The cashiers were simply moved off site and they watched as you shopped. And it's interesting to me because it just sort of underscores how confusing all of this can be for normies trying to make sense of what's actually happening in tech. Because when you go back to when this was announced, I remember trying it for the first time and it felt almost wrong. Like it certainly felt like I was living in the future.
Yep.
And you had Amazon, who was pretty opaque about how exactly the technology worked and was happy to let people believe that this was all being done by magic machine learning that was proprietary and, eons beyond any other competitor. And then you go back to last week.
It apparently mostly was.
Exactly. And the way it was characterized by the media was even more misleading because they made it seem like the machine learning was entirely a lie. And the only way this worked was by having a bunch of workers in India surveil shoppers the entire time. And that's not what was happening. This is machine learning, which does involve humans, helping to ensure accuracy. And grocery stores, just strategically speaking, grocery stores present a much trickier challenge. So you can understand why Amazon looks at this and says, the margins are lower here and the spectrum of items that need to be cataloged is just way more diverse than what you're getting at a stadium or an airport. So it's not necessarily worth the investment.
But if you did think about it for a couple seconds, which I did insufficiently, or at least talked about it insufficiently, just the number is not big enough. 1,000 people is not enough people to actually be verifying all these transactions. It has to be working sort of at some level.
When I first heard the story, I was immediately skeptical. It was one of those things that would be like a storyline on Silicon Valley, the HBO show, and it just seemed a little bit too cartoonish to be real. And then we got a number of just really good emails from listeners explaining what was really going on. And the reason normies would maybe be confused on this point is because you hear machine learning and you think it's almost entirely automated. So you hear 1,000 humans are involved. And then it's like, well, wait a second. They're pulling the rug out from underneath me here. This was all like an outsourcing operation by Amazon, which isn't the reality of how that technology works. So in case anyone's curious, I'll just read this note from Matt before we move on. He says, it's likely that AI is handling the majority of the work on this project, particularly through computer vision. However, there will be instances where AI may encounter confusion or have low confidence in its assessments, such as differentiating between items or sizes. In these cases, human oversight is crucial to supervise and assist the AI in making accurate decisions. While the goal is to minimize the need for human intervention over time as AI improves, it is essential to recognize that initially, human involvement is necessary to refine and improve the AI through labeled data. This approach is not a weakness, but a strategic and necessary part of building autonomous systems. And that's going to be true for everything that happens in AI.
It's true
the
for all the
next 10
stuff we're talking
years.
about right now, right? A huge part, we talk about RLHF, reinforcement learning from human feedback. Like that
Right.
that was the big breakthrough for Chat GPT. We had GPT-3, which would put out this content. And if you looked at the content, it's like, wow, that's pretty incredible what it is putting out. But it would devolve into gibberish sort of over time. And it would sort of do sort of weird stuff, right? And so what OpenAI really nailed wasn't just the sort of the model itself, but was they really figured out how to do RLHF sort of effectively. And it's interesting because that's where all the questions and challenges of bias and pushing things in particular directions, that also comes through RLHF. I think actually my first interview with Nat and Daniel, sort of an ongoing series on trajectory about AI, we did that before ChatGPT. And I believe we had a discussion about RLHF in there, in that our concern was like, this is going to be a thing. Are we going to get sort of the hectoring sort of HR sort of voice to this, and it's going to turn people off from AI? It turned out that yes, we were going to get that, and yes, it would turn people off, but also it was also essential. That's what actually made it sort of break through, right? And so this human aspect is really important. And you at the beginning you need a ton of it. Like they have a huge host of, there's a whole company, Scale AI, that's like all about, they have like contractors like all over the world. Basically, they're just doing grunt work of like checking, is this answer right or is it not, or is sort of XYZ. And like there's a lot of grunt work that goes into this. And to the emailer's point, the better this gets, ideally, the less you need. And then also ideally, as it's in the real world and real people are using it, you're getting feedback in real time. So that's why it's really important. Like that's why OpenAI has to specify, okay, the corporate one, we're not collecting the question or information. The implication of that is the general consumer one, of course they are, because that feedback mechanism of people's responses, and they all have the thumbs up, thumbs down sort of thing there, is, even though that might be low quality feedback because people aren't incentivized to do it, just getting that feedback is so valuable to making these systems work and work better. And yeah, it's integral to the process.